I will be so glad if you're watching this right now. Truly, because if you're still here, it means you chose to pause. You chose not to scroll. You chose to listen. And that choice matters more than you realize. Jesus is smiling right now, not because everything in your life is perfect, not because you've finally become strong enough, but because you stopped long enough to hear something he's been trying to tell you. Heaven notices moments like this. When the world is loud and your heart is tired, you still chose to be here. That is not an accident. I know how heavy you've been feeling. I know there are thoughts you don't share with anyone, smiles you wear for others, and weakness you hide behind silence. Some days you feel capable. Other days you feel like you're barely holding on, like you're not enough, like something is wrong with you that everyone else seems to have figured out. You look around and everyone seems so confident, so put together, so strong. And you wonder, why am I like this? Why can't I be like them? Why does everything feel so hard for me? And still you wake up. Still you keep going. Still you try. Jesus sees that, even when you don't. He sees the effort it takes just to get through a normal day. He sees the prayers you've prayed for strength that seem unanswered. He sees the shame you carry about who you are, and he doesn't look away. But here's what I want you to hear today. Something that might change everything you've believed about your weakness. God didn't make a mistake when he made you. Your trembling hands, your cracking voice, your inadequacy, your not enoughness. That wasn't God forgetting to give you what others have. That was God preparing a canvas for his power to be seen. And I know that sounds strange, maybe even impossible to believe right now, but stay with me, because what you're about to hear might be the most freeing thing you've ever discovered. You know that feeling when you pray for strength and nothing changes? When you ask God to make you confident, capable, impressive, and you wake up the next morning still the same, still anxious, still inadequate, still trembling, and you think, why won't God fix me? But here's what God actually said to someone who felt exactly like you. Paul, one of the greatest people in the Bible, had something he called a thorn. We don't know exactly what it was, but it was weakness, limitation, something that wouldn't go away no matter how much he prayed. He begged God 3 times to remove it, 3 times, pleading, desperate for strength, and God said no. But not because God wanted Paul to suffer. God said something that changes everything. My grace is enough for you. My power works best in weakness. Let that land for a moment. My power works best in weakness. Not despite your weakness, not after you overcome your weakness, in your weakness, right there. That's where God's power shines brightest. You see, there's an old Greek word for weakness, asthenia. It simply means without strength. The place where you don't have what it takes, where you can't do it on your own. And God looked at that place, that empty, inadequate, not enough place, and said, perfect. That's exactly where I want to show up. Not in your strength, in your weakness. Because when you're strong, you get the credit. But when you're weak and something beautiful still happens, everyone knows it wasn't you. It was God. Let me tell you about someone I know. He was a young pastor, standing in front of the church board, hands trembling as he tried to explain why things weren't going well. He'd been praying for years for strength, for confidence, for the kind of presence that would make people listen. Every night before bed, he would pray, God, please make me strong tomorrow. Please give me confidence. Please take away this anxiety. And every morning he would wake up. Exactly the same. Instead, my voice cracked, he told me. My notes fell to the floor. I felt that familiar heat of shame, the same shame I'd felt my whole life whenever weakness showed. He drove home in tears. God, why won't you make me strong? Why do you keep letting me fail like this? I've prayed so many times. I've tried so hard. What's wrong with me? Maybe you've prayed that prayer. Maybe you're praying it right now. Why won't you fix me, God? Why won't you make me capable? Why did you give others what you didn't give me? You've watched other people speak with confidence, lead with authority, walk into rooms without fear, and you've wondered, what do they have that I don't? But here's what that pastor discovered years later. God wasn't ignoring his prayer. God was answering a different prayer, one he hadn't known to pray yet. Not make me strong, but let your strength show through my weakness. There's a beautiful word Paul used. He said God's power would rest on him like a tent being pitched over him, like a covering, a warm blanket on a cold night, like arms wrapping around us when we're shaking. God wasn't making Paul strong in himself. God was covering Paul's weakness with his own presence. That pastor told me about the day everything changed. I was at a conference. The speaker talked about Paul's thorn, how Paul begged 3 times for God to remove it, and God said no. He paused, and I could see tears forming. Then the speaker said something I'll never forget. God didn't say no because he wanted Paul to suffer. He said no because he wanted Paul to experience something better than strength, divine power resting on human weakness. He looked at me. I realized I'd spent my whole life praying the wrong prayer, asking God to make me strong, fix my inadequacy, turn me into someone impressive. But God was answering a different prayer all along. Let your power be visible in me. And his power couldn't be visible if I was already strong. And today that pastor still has trembling hands, still has moments where his voice cracks, still feels that familiar nervousness, but something shifted. The breakthrough wasn't becoming strong, he told me. It was discovering that my weakness was exactly where God wanted to show up. When I stopped fighting my weakness and started offering it to God, that's when everything changed. Not my circumstances, my peace. If that's landing somewhere in your heart right now, you're not alone. So many of us have been exhausted trying to be strong enough for God to use us. But God isn't waiting for us to become adequate. He's waiting for us to stop hiding our inadequacy. You know what's beautiful? This pattern shows up again and again in the Bible. Not as heavy theology, but as gentle reminder. God keeps choosing the weak ones, over and over again. Think about Moses for a moment. He had a speech problem. His words came out slow and heavy. When God asked him to go speak to the most powerful king on earth, Moses said, God, I can't speak well. Please send it to someone else. Can you feel that? The desperation, the shame. I'm not the right person for this. Find someone better, someone who can actually do it. And you know what God said? He didn't fix the speech problem. He didn't suddenly make Moses eloquent. He simply said, I will be with you. That's it. The weakness stayed, but God's presence entered into it. Moses stammered before the most powerful king on earth, and God delivered an entire nation through those stammering lips. Not because Moses became strong, because God showed up in his weakness. And then there's Gideon. When God found him, he was literally hiding in a wine press because he was terrified. And God called him Mighty Warrior. Can you imagine how absurd that must have sounded? Gideon actually laughed. Me, Mighty Warrior? My family is the weakest, and I'm the least in my family. You've got the wrong person. But God's response, I will be with you. Then God did something that seems crazy. When Gideon gathered 32,000 soldiers, God said, too many. Send most of them home. 32,000 became 10,000, then 300. 300 men against an army of thousands. Why? Because God wanted the victory to be unmistakably his. Not Gideon's, not the army's, God's. When you have everything you need, you get the credit. But when you have almost nothing and still win, everyone knows it was God. Do you see it? God doesn't just tolerate weakness. He seeks it out. He reduces the resources on purpose, because weak people make his power visible. Strong people make themselves visible. But weak people, they make God visible. Here's the truth that sets you free. God chose the foolish to shame the wise. God chose the weak to shame the strong. God chose the nobodies to bring down the somebodies. Why? So that no one could boast, no one could take credit, no one could say, "I did that." When God works through someone obviously strong, we think, "Wow, they're amazing." But when God works through someone obviously weak, we think, "Wow, God is amazing." The weakness redirects the glory. Your inadequacy isn't blocking God's power, it's making room for it. This is permission, beloved. Permission to stop trying to become adequate. Permission to stop hiding your weakness like a shameful secret. Permission to stop performing strength you don't have. God's waiting for you to stop hiding long enough for his presence to cover you. Some of you have spent years, maybe decades, trying to become strong enough to be used by God, strong enough to stop feeling ashamed, strong enough to finally be worthy. And you're exhausted because the goal keeps moving and you never quite arrive. But here's what Jesus is whispering to you right now. You were never meant to arrive at strength. You were meant to arrive at surrender. Surrender your weakness to my presence and discover that my power was waiting there all along. Paul said something remarkable after God told him no. He said, "When I am weak, then I am strong. Not when I become strong, then I'm useful. When I am weak, then I am strong." The weakness itself becomes the condition for strength. The inadequacy becomes the invitation. And he didn't just accept his weakness. He said he delighted in it. Why? Because he discovered something most people never find. Weakness is the doorway to a strength no performance could ever produce. I will be so glad if you're still watching, because Jesus wants to speak something directly to your heart right now. You may feel like your weakness disqualifies you, like you've tried and failed too many times, like others have what you don't, like God made a mistake when he made you this way. But hear this gently. Your weakness was never meant to disqualify you. It was meant to be the place where God's power is most clearly seen. That thing you're ashamed of, those trembling hands, that anxious mind, that inadequacy you hide from everyone. God isn't waiting for you to fix it. He's waiting for you to bring it to him, not so he can make you strong in yourself, so he can cover your weakness with his presence. Some of you have been performing strength for years, smiling when you're breaking, serving when you're empty, pretending when you're falling apart, and you're exhausted. Jesus sees that exhaustion. He knows the weight of that performance, and he says, "You can stop now. You don't have to be strong first. You just have to be honest." If you can whisper this prayer quietly in your heart, "Jesus, I'm tired of pretending to be strong. I'm tired of hiding my weakness. Here it is, all of it. I give you permission to show up in my inadequacy." That prayer does not go unheard. Heaven responds immediately to honest hearts. You don't need fancy words. You don't need to pray perfectly. You just need to be honest. "Here's my weakness, God. I can't hide it anymore. I'm tired of trying." That's enough. That's more than enough. Because God isn't looking for perfect prayers. He's looking for honest hearts. This week, try something different. When you feel inadequate, instead of hiding it, name it. God, I don't have what it takes for this, but you do. When shame rises instead of performing strength, remember, Moses stammered. Gideon hid. Paul had weakness that never left, and God used them all, not despite their weakness, through it. When you're tempted to wait until you're strong enough to step out anyway. And watch what God does with trembling hands and cracking voices. And here's something practical tomorrow morning when you wake up and feel that familiar inadequacy. Instead of asking God to make you strong, try asking something different. God, today I'm bringing my weakness to you, not asking you to fix it, asking you to show up in it. Let your power be visible through my not enoughness. And then watch. Watch for moments when something happens that you couldn't have done on your own. Watch for moments when words come that you didn't plan. Watch for moments when peace shows up in the middle of your trembling. That's Him. That's His power resting on your weakness. Because here's the truth that sets you free. You don't have to become adequate. You just have to become honest. And in that honesty, discover that God's adequacy is more than enough. More than enough for your job. More than enough for your family. More than enough for your calling. More than enough for whatever you're facing. You just have to stop pretending you're enough on your own and let Him be enough for you. What does this mean that God chose weakness? It means you're not disqualified. It means your inadequacy is invitation. It means the very thing you've been hiding might be exactly what God wants to use. Let me say that again, because I know how hard it is to believe. The very thing you've been ashamed of, the weakness you've hidden from everyone, the inadequacy you've tried so hard to fix, that might be exactly what qualifies you for what God wants to do. Not despite the weakness, because of it. Moses stammered before Pharaoh, and God delivered Israel. Gideon fought with 300 men against thousands, and God won the battle. Paul kept his weakness, and God's power rested on him. That young pastor still trembles, and God speaks through him every week. Your weakness isn't your failure, it's your opportunity. Because when something beautiful happens through trembling hands and cracking voices and obvious inadequacy, everyone knows who did it, not you. And that's exactly what He wants. Not for His ego, but for your freedom. Because as long as you think you have to be strong, you'll be exhausted. But when you discover that your weakness is the canvas for His strength, you can finally rest. I will be so glad if this reached you today. Because one day you will look back at this moment and realize it was a turning point. Not because everything changed instantly, but because you chose to stop hiding, chose to stop performing, chose to let God's strength show through your weakness. You are not alone. You never were. Jesus is with you in the inadequacy, with you in the trembling, with you in the not enoughness, and He is not ashamed of your weakness. He chose it on purpose because He loves you, and He wanted to make sure that when beautiful things happen in your life, you would really know that it was Him, not you trying harder, not you finally getting it together. Him, His power, His presence, His love, resting on your weakness. So bring your weakness into the light and discover what Moses discovered, what Gideon discovered, what Paul discovered, what that young pastor discovered. God's presence enters our inadequacy. His power rests on our weakness. And when He does something through people who clearly couldn't do it themselves, the whole world sees. It wasn't them. It was Him. That's why God chose weakness. Not because He's cruel, because He's after something better than your performance. He's after your trust, and trust grows best in the soil of inadequacy. When you have nothing left to rely on but Him, that's when you discover that He is more than enough. Welcome to the freedom of weakness, where God's power is finally free to be seen, where your not enough becomes His more than enough, where your trembling hands become His canvas. My grace is enough for you. My power works best in weakness. Rest in that. Let those words wash over you. You don't have to try harder tomorrow. You don't have to fix yourself before God can use you. You just have to bring your weakness to Him and watch what He does. And Jesus is closer than you think. Right here, right now, covering your inadequacy with His presence, waiting to show His power through your weakness. Let Him. You are safe. You are held. You are enough not because you're strong, but because He is. And that changes everything.